Hey, what's going on, peeps? I just wanted to make a quick video, not really a guide, but more so a review of what I'm doing to get my Evoker ready for Dragonflight. I might start doing a normal thing like this every week. I know I've talked about it in the past, but I didn't really have any good reason with content kind of just drying up as we approach Dragonflight. So maybe we'll start this up, a little Chartechs chats, similar to Chartechs chests, but a few letters rearranged. Anyways, I've been seeing a lot of positive changes and interactions to Evoker that have really just made me rethink if I want to main that in Dragonflight. I was kind of always turned off by the limited range and what seemed like a lot of casting that they had to do. And with them making Echo be instant cast, and on top of the way they've changed a lot of the empowerments, along with increasing the range, of course, that really kind of made me rethink that. What's going to determine if I end up maining it is basically how good it feels in raid. So my goal is to get my Evoker geared so I can raid with my guild this upcoming week, and then the week after that, obviously. So this is just to make sure if I'm realistically going to be able to heal in our raid in a 10 to 15 person environment. Sometimes we have 20 and we have plenty of people, but then a lot of times we end up with only 10 to 15. And then when you get to the end of the patch, you end up with more towards the 10 than the 15. Just depends on how our recruiting goes going into Dragonflight. But being that our server is a little bit on the, I mean, it's not small, it's decently sized, but it's not one of the giant servers where there's an abundance of people to recruit all the time. So this is kind of just what I'm gonna do to get geared in order to do it and give some people ideas for some easy ways to get some gear. Realistically, you shouldn't do this. Evokers are only going to be out for 2 weeks prior to Dragonflight coming out, and then all of the gear that you get right now is going to be basically irrelevant. I just want to see how it feels at a relative gear level. Some clarifications: I'm not a theory crafter, I'm not a guide maker. I kind of just look at what other people are doing, get ideas on how things work, and then add my own play style to it to make sure that it makes sense for me. Obviously, I don't play things that just are bad, but things like having interrupts or CC, I will sometimes prioritize over DPS, because there's no point in having good DPS if nobody lives because of it. Don't take what I say as gospel, that's for sure. So with that said, let's get into what I'm going to be doing to get ready. First things first, the Evokers will be coming out of their starting zone at around 225 to 230, according to the most recent updates that we have. Assuming nothing changes, then that should be the case, which is pretty good. Normally when you get out of Shadowlands leveling, you end up at sub 200. So this is actually a really good change, and as far as I know, that is actually changing when Shadowlands gets added to Chromie time here on the 15th. It was 190 in the past, so if you've seen information around that, then that was true, but they have since buffed it. Your rare items that are going to be coming from turning in quests and stuff are going to be 236 item level, and then sometimes you'll get the occasional 242 upgrade. So, Shadowlands systems, what legendaries am I going to be using? First thing I did was I bought my 291 legendary base pieces of gear. So your Evokers are going to have access to Unity Legendary, which everyone, as long as you have the Unity memory, everyone on your account should have it. And then also they'll have access to any of the base legendaries that are non-class specific. So that's stuff like Maw Rattle, First Judgment of the Arbiter, Echo of ANR, things like that. So I went ahead and bought mine last week, or this last week, because I fully expect the prices are going to skyrocket just because people are going to want to buy them. So I went ahead and bought those a little while ago just to make sure I had them ready. And I'm really hoping that any of the future gear I get doesn't conflict with the legendary, but having a 291 legendary is going to be very good for getting my gear started. Being that it is male armor, so remember this is a new male armor class, which is great. Historically, their gear prices are always high only because there's so few of them. It's in high demand, but low supply. I did buy my missives. So far it's looking like crit is going to be their best secondary stat, When you're raiding, your next best secondary stat would be Mastery, but if you're doing Mythic Plus, it's either going to be Haste or Verse. Just depends on how high of content you're doing. Haste is always good for increasing your spell time. I don't believe that Haste actually impacts your Empowerment spell cast time, so that is unfortunate. So maybe a more verse-heavy build, not sure yet. The Theory Crafter people will figure all that out and let us all know eventually. So then I went ahead and pre-packaged all the currency that I'm going to need in order to upgrade or to craft those legendaries in the first place. So for 2 legendaries, I need 4,000 Flux, 3,300 Soul Cinders, and 10,300 Soul Ash. Realistically, if you've been playing Shadowlands since the start, you probably have all of this just lying around somewhere. I have every class leveled to max already and have them all relatively geared, so I don't have a ton of that stuff because I've gotten them all their 291s, but I have enough. So I already prepackaged that, sent everything to my ult, so all the legendary base items, the currencies, and I even bought a 262 ring. So those are the unique crafted 262 rings, just so that I don't end up getting that 262 piece overtaken immediately with a piece of gear. So if I end up getting a ring that's really good, I'll still have the 262 ring plus whatever ring it is that I got. That'll be just nice to have. So what legendary am I using? Of course, my first legendary that I'm going to have is my Unity legendary, which buffs my Covenant ability. And then the next one I have is Echoes of ANR. Really, the 2 legendaries you could go for are either Echo of ANR or Judgment of the First Arbiter, I think. I went with Echo of ANR, we only have 2 weeks left, and I've always thought Echo of ANR was pretty interesting. I do love the big, smashy, Drust dude, and I was actually really disappointed with how it went into Shadowlands. During the beta of Shadowlands, I played with it, and I thought it was a lot of fun, but then they nerfed the proc chance for it to happen, for your Echo of ANR to show up, and so obviously it didn't end up being as good as people thought it was going to be. So this will be my chance to just play around with it and have some fun with it right before Dragonflight launches. Covenant stuff. So we have a couple things that are related to covenants that I'm taking care of. Of course, you have your conduits. You can buy all conduits at 200 item level from the broker next to the Flightmaster and Ouroboros. I believe the one you buy in Zereth Mortis, you actually have to have some sort of Zereth Mortis reputation to get. I have to double check on what other potential ways I can get all those conduits, but as of right now, I'm just planning on getting the 200 item level conduits, and the other ones will just come as I go. The conduits you do get as a Drakthir are mostly just staff for damage healing buffs. There's nothing too exciting with them. They're pretty boring, probably took 2 seconds for them to implement, so just want to throw some on there and get that done. As for what soulbind you want, it doesn't really matter what covenant you are. Your covenant is mostly just a flavor for whatever your signature ability that you want is. So you can choose whatever soulbind you want, whatever covenant you want. There might be some interactions between certain soulbinds that are better for Evoker or not. It doesn't really matter to me. I'll probably just go Night Fae or something, just so I can have the cheat death. But that's basically it. So Dreamweaver probably is a good one. Who knows? Most ranged classes, Dreamweaver, Night Fae is a pretty good build. Your covenant ability is called Boon of the Covenants. Basically what this is you call upon the covenants of the Shadowlands to aid you, restoring a percentage of health and increasing your versatility by 10%. The passive portion of this is the covenants have granted you a portion of your power, which increases your damage and healing by 4%. So that part's always on, whereas the on-use portion of it is increasing your verse and giving you some health back. It's interesting actually that there is a passive to this. I don't think that there's really any other class that has a passive portion of their covenant ability in addition to the on-use part, which is kind of unique and interesting, but it's also not, because it's just here's 4% damage and healing. Your unity, how this impacts it, so your unity always impacts your covenant ability somehow. With this, it increases the damage and healing passively by another 5%. So there's no change to how your on-use works, which is, it's all right. I'm fine with that. It's just going to be something to help me survive longer in Shadowlands while we're in Prepatch. So outside of Legendaries, how else did I start gearing up my character before it's even available yet. So I mentioned I bought the 262 uniques and I bought the legendary base items. So the other way that I started gearing my character is through PvP. I've never really been much of a PvPer. I did a little bit in season 1, but then my group fell apart right as we were about to hit the Vicious Mount, and never really went back to it since season 1 of Shadowlands. Right now, with not much else to do, I decided to try out Solo Shuffle because it's something new and interesting, and quickly realized that I can buy boxes of 272 PvP gear and send it to alts. So once you hit 1400 rating in any rated PvP category, including Solo Shuffle, you can use your conquest to buy these conquest boxes to send to your alts. So it costs 375 conquest per box, and it just gives you a random item. So what I did is I went and farmed up a bunch of conquest, got my 1400 rating, did some 2s with my friend, and just did a bunch of other random PvP activities to just get as much conquest as I could, and bought a bunch of boxes and sent that off to one of my alts. And so all of my legendaries and bought gear is now sitting on an alt somewhere, ready for me to just send it to my Evoker and get that going. So once my Evoker's all leveled up and I have all the gear crafted, the gear grind begins. Of course, the first thing I'm going to do is do the round of world bosses, hoping for 272 loot from the anniversary bosses and 285 loot from the Shadowlands ones. So for the world bosses, you can get 4 bosses per day. So you have Doomwalker, Kazakh, Azurgos, and one of the other random dragons. Hopefully not the mushroom one, because you'll just spend all day asleep. And then the Shadowlands ones, all 3 are active right now. So your Season 1 Shadowlands world boss, which is one of the 4 rotating ones in the Shadowlands zones. You have Morgeth, who's in the Maw, and you have Antros, who's in Zereth Mortis. You can kill those once a week, and those drop 285 loot, which is great. I've been doing that on all of my alts that are still under 270, 280 item level, just to fill out some slots. Hasn't been super good on gearing, but I'm getting a piece here and there every once in a while. So once the world bosses are done for me, it is then time for me to jump into Mythic Plus. I'll probably do a couple 2s or 0s to get a better feel for my class in dungeons. Once I get a better feel for the class, I should be able to jump into 10s or 15s with a bunch of male characters in hopes that they'll be able to trade me some loot. There's a lot of shamans in my guild, so that are all very well geared, so hopefully I can convince some of them to help me out. We do have someone in my guild who's going to main Evoker, so I'll probably be running a lot of content with them. Will I do LFR? No. I wrote on my script that I probably won't, but at this point, no, I'm not going to do any LFR. Thanks. No thanks. Yeah, it would probably be good in order to get Dinar and get a free piece of loot, but honestly, LFR is just going to take too much time, potentially. So there's other things I can do that are just going to be quicker as far as gearing. So one of those things is going to be the newly released Ummmmmmmm Legacy of Tyr dungeon that is coming out on the 15th with the Evoker launch. All the gear that drops from there is going to be 278, and as well a quest that gives you 278 weapon. According to this tweet from Mr. GM, thank you, I would never have known that without you, because that wasn't on any of the guides that I've seen so far. Also, shout out to Mr. GM for doing a lot of beta testing and finding out a lot of this stuff ahead of time. I will say that a lot of the information that I've gotten seems to have come from him a lot of the time. So shout out to him, go check him out. Really, it depends on how easy the dungeon is versus the reward doing it in a pug. So a +8 dungeon gives 278 gear as well. We'll just see how it goes whenever that comes out, and I'll decide on whether I want to just spam that dungeon for easy 278 gear or not. I'm also going to be doing this on my alts. Probably like 5 of my alts are still using a 229 Zereth Mortis weapon, so getting that 278 quest weapon would be nice to have. My final thoughts and conclusions, once I'm at around 280 or 290, I'll be happy enough to go into our guild raids and not feel like a burden to them, and get a pretty good idea of what it's going to feel like to be progressing the raid on my Evoker. Since that gear item level is about where I was when we started out in Season 3 season 4 of Shadowlands, and we started progressing. Doing beta isn't really the same as doing it on live, obviously, especially when you have a guild that you do stuff with and they aren't in the beta, so you don't do raids in the beta with them. So this will just give me a really good idea on how Evoker feels and what I can expect going into Dragonflight if I decide to main Evoker. Right now it's looking pretty solid. We'll find out over the next week whether I choose to main Evoker or if I swap to something else like Priest or Monk. Those are my other two options right now. More heavily leaning to Monk, but we shall see how it goes. My main class for DPS, I've said it a couple times, but not in this video. My main DPS class is always going to be my Enhancement Shaman. If I can avoid raiding, then I'm going to end up being an Enhancement Shaman next season. But it looks like we won't have enough healers in my guild, so I'll end up healing anyways. Which is fine. I do enjoy healing a lot. I got KSM on every healer in Season 3, along with Keystone Hero on 2 of them. So no problems with healing. Pretty flexible person. But yeah, that's really all I have to say for what I'm doing in order to prepare my Evoker, in order to play him on high-end content in Prepatch. Can't wait to see all the Evokers on Tuesday coming out and getting into content and seeing everyone's party frames just filled with green. Or blue, because I could really use the male gear. So green or blue, not Monk, that's fine, come on down. That'll do it for me. I hope you have a good last 2 weeks of the Prepatch, and I'll see you in Dragonflight. Peace.